Our problem is that we're always thinking in terms of goals, and that's very superficial of us. We can explain why it's absolutely no good at all thinking about goals, dwelling on goals, orientating ourselves towards goals when it's the psychological sphere that we're talking about. By thinking in terms of polarity, a polarity is like a little bar magnet. It's got a north pole at one end and a south pole at the other end. And if you wanted to imagine what it looks like in terms of the magnetic field lines, we can, of course, do that experiment where we put iron filings on a sheet of paper and hold the sheet of paper over the bar magnet. And what we see then is that all the field lines shoot out of the North Pole. They sprout out like alfalfa, and then they curl round, spread out a bit, and travel down parallel to the bar magnet, and then they re-enter the South Pole, bunching up together again as they do so. So what that shows us is that the bar magnet creates its own type of reality out of magnetism. And the special thing about this type of reality is that it's distorted. It's positively curved, which means it comes back on itself. And what this means is that the reality that's created by a bar magnet, if we can carry on calling it a reality, is a closed system. No matter where we go, no matter which way we choose to travel, we shoot out of the North Pole, we think we're getting somewhere and it's all very exciting, and then we're back in the North Pole and we're doing it all over again. So that's the definition of a closed system or closed world. All journeys come back to where they started. And there's a little bit more to it than this that we can talk about as well. So we're not really talking about magnets. This isn't a lecture in magnetism. If it was, it wouldn't go on very long because I don't know enough about magnetism. Instead, what we're discussing is polarity. Polarity could be anything. It doesn't have to be magnetism. It doesn't have to be anything at all. It could be whatever it is. But the key idea is that there's a plus at one end and a minus at the other end. And there's the illusion that we're traveling out into space, and there's the hidden reality that we're not actually traveling anywhere, but we're just caught up in a type of manufactured reality. So all polarities are manufactured realities. Now, the reason this gets relevant is because the thinking mind always creates polarities. There's nothing else it can do. There's no way it could create a non-polarity. And we can see this by looking at the actual structure or the mechanism of thought, which no matter what else we might say, if we just come right back to the very basis of it, thought always exists between two poles, two opposites, one being yes and the other being no. With the thinking mind, we interrogate the world based on our criteria, based on our categories. Each category has a possibility of a yes answer and a no answer. So if I find a strange furry animal, I can say, is it a cat? And then there's only two possible answers to that closed question. Yes or no. Yes, it's a cat. No, that's not a cat. There's no other answer to a closed question. And the thought can never ask anything apart from closed questions. All categories are preset, predetermined, they're already made. So there's a nice simple way of thinking about the thinking mind, even though that's very tortuous. We can say that the thinking mind is an array of categories, an array of criteria or rules to help us evaluate the world. And these criteria or rules never change, they're just given, and they're used to interpret every possible situation that can arise for us. So it's clear, once we see this, that the process of thought converts the non-polarity, which is reality, which we could also talk about in terms of an open system, a system that hasn't been decided in advance, into the closed system, which is our way of understanding the world. Now, of course, we could argue that actually there's no such thing as an open system, and that everything in life is predetermined from the onset, but we just don't know it. So that would be a familiar philosophical tack to take. I think Calvinism would believe that. So if you're born in a Calvinist family, they'll tell you quite early on that everything in your life is predetermined and there's nothing you can do about it. If you're born into any household that adheres to this the philosophy of determinism, that's what we'll hear, of course. Kind of disconcerting to hear it, really. That your life is a closed book, it kind of nullifies everything. You wonder what the hell is the point? If I'm destined to be an evil person who does bad things and then goes to hell, as according to the Calvinist book of rules, if you're a bad person, you have to go to hell. There's nothing I can do about that. Even as a little baby, I'm already earmarked for hell. But anyway, it is possible to argue that life itself is a closed system, and if we do argue that, then we're arguing basically that there's no such thing as life or no such thing as reality, because all closed systems, as I was saying earlier, negate themselves. They say something and then they say, unsay it, undo it later on. So we're saying something when we're shooting out of the North Pole, and we're reversing what we said when we re-enter into the North Pole, or whichever way around. So, for example, I could say, I like you, and then on the next breath, I don't like you. So the fact that I say I like you means nothing because I've negated it, and the fact that I said I don't like you is also negated because I negate that. So it's an ongoing circle of self-negating statements, and that's what a closed system is. That's the meaning of a closed system. It's an oscillation between yes and no. And the thing about an oscillation is that it is self-cancelling or self-negating activity, movement, change. I jump across the line, and I jump right back again. And then I jump across the line again, and then jump right back again. And so the man who wrote the laws of form, Spencer Brown, came up with one of his laws, which is to cross twice is not to cross. And that little neat, super neat little rule or law says everything we need to know about a closed system. A closed system is where we cross twice. We always cross twice. Whatever we do, we undo it. If I was to be doing something and not undoing it, that would be an open system. So it wouldn't be positively curved space that curves. It would be negatively curved space. It just goes out and out and it never comes back again. So we can't talk about it in terms of a nice, neat polarity. So if it is true that reality is predetermined, that's just another way of saying there is no reality. So for us to sit around here pontificating and saying there is no reality, why are we bothering saying it then? It's all a bit stupid, isn't it? So we won't go down that road. We won't go down the road of arguing that life is predetermined and that the universe is a closed system. An absolute waste of time. It's like saying everything I say is nonsense. Exactly the same thing. A self-defeating statement. So, to understand polarity helps us an awful lot, because when we think about psychology, or we think about the process of thought, the first thing that jumps into our mind isn't polarity, which means we've been suckered. We don't understand that thought is polar, and we're treating it as if it's non-polar, and it isn't. So we've been totally suckered, and we're going down a dead alley, dead lane. We're going to end up in a cul-de-sac. There's absolutely no way we can study psychology without understanding that thought is polar. And how many times do you read that in a psychology book? First sentence should be thought is polar. Thought is a polarity. Worlds created out of thought are polar worlds. But anyway, we won't get hung up on what is or is not in the psychology textbooks. So the next point that we come to is a point that helps us to understand why goal-orientated striving is completely useless in terms of if we're working with mental health. Now, from everything that I've just said, straight away, that's self-explanatory. Of course, goal-orientated striving is useless, because goals are created by thought, and to strive after a goal is to involve ourselves in a loop of logic that we can't see to be a loop of logic. Another way of putting this is to say that when we talk about changing ourselves or making some kind of obtaining some kind of therapeutic output result in terms of whatever we're doing, it's kind of fashionable to talk about goals. But if we talk about goals, then what we're basically saying is that all we need to concern ourselves is the reality that thought provides us with, because goals are thought, they're not anything else. So straight away we're ignoring the non-polar, we're ignoring the world out there, which is an open universe, open world. If I'm engaging in goal-orientated striving, I kind of think of someone who's got constipation sitting on the toilet. They're striving and, they want to attain the goal, but maybe they're having difficulties, but that just means you have to strive harder. What this means is that where we are now has been conceptualized. Obviously it is. I've conceptualized where I am as not being where I want to be. I've conceptualized where I am as being not a good place. And I've also conceptualized what would be a good place, where I want to be, what would be great. And that's why I get so excited by goals, because I've said this goal represents a great event, a great outcome. It's a great thing. It's like Christmas. It's like winning the lotto. It's a really, really good thing. So I get excited about it, and I get excited in the reverse way about the possibility of missing the goal, because that's very bad. But all of this is taking place within my map of the world, within my mind. All of this is taking place within the polarity of the thought-created world. My goal is one pole plus, super good. Where I don't want to be, which is failing to reach the goal, is the other pole. Yes and no. It's a polarity. So you never just have the goal. You never just have what you want. You also have what you don't want. And that's what makes the polarity. So I'm never, ever escaping from my mind. What I'm actually doing when I invest heavily in goal-orientated striving is that I'm completely immersing myself in the virtual reality that has been created by thought. I'm ignoring everything outside of it, and I'm trying to do my business entirely with this world, because I think that the world, the polar world, which is created by thought, is the only world there is. But the polar world, which is created by thought, isn't a world. It isn't anything. It's a self-negating It's a self-negating construct, a self-negating concept or statement. It's a polarity, plus and minus. And hey, guess what? Plus and minus cancel each other out. And what do you get when you have 6 and minus 6 combined? You don't have nothing. So it doesn't matter what happens in the thought-created polarity. It always cancels itself out. And so the closed world that we've immersed ourselves in, and which we have said implicitly is the only world there is, doesn't exist. It's not a world, it's not anything, it doesn't exist. It's just a bit of confusion. It's a null world. So just like a null set is the set with no elements in it, there's no problem with that. There's plenty of null sets you could think of. The set of all people with 6 heads and 3 legs, there's nobody in that set. So it's a null set, I think. So we're concerning ourselves with a null set. And no matter what we get up to in that null set, it's never going to make any difference. It doesn't matter what we get up to in the null set, because it's all nothing anyway, to put it fairly crudely. So somehow we're trying to help ourselves by immersing ourselves in thought's view of the world, which is polar, and imagining that this is going to help us. But the root cause of our mental suffering, the root cause of the whole range of the neurotic spectrum, is being trapped in a polarity. Being trapped in a polarity is like being trapped in a very, very small prison cell, and it's just not good to be trapped in a very, very small prison cell. Our minds, our consciousness are boxed in. We're in the box so much. That's not good, because there's a whole big universe out there which is wonderful, and it's not made up of the mind's made up artificial statements which negate themselves. It's not made up of rules. It's just openness, and it's out there. But we don't care about it. We don't acknowledge it. We don't know anything about it. We're obsessed over this little pile of this little corner we've got, which is the nullity, which is the null set. And we hope to find the answers in there. So the fundamental thing that we're doing there is that we're denying reality as it is. We're turning our back on it, thereby hoping to improve our situation. But the pain that's in our situation was caused by our denial of reality in the first place. Now, of course, everyone's going to say, I don't deny reality. I'm a big fan. Or, we might say that. But the thing is that we're confused, because what we call reality is just a mind-generated polarity. That's got nothing to do with reality. It's a trick, cheap trick. But if we don't know anything else, it will fall for it, and we'll think, yeah, this is the real deal. This is super great. This is what it's all about. But it isn't what it's all about, because that's about nothing, as I keep saying. So our solution to the problems caused by being oblivious to reality itself and being caught up in hyper-reality instead is to delve into hyper-reality more. And that's absolutely what we're doing. If we were to sit there and just dwell on it a bit, we'd have to see that that is absolutely what we're doing. We're just hanging out in hyper-reality. We're just glorifying the hyper-real. We've made our whole world out of the hyper-real, and we're mining it for more possibilities. And yet, the hyper-real, despite all the promotions, despite all the ads, the glitz and the glamour and all the rest of it, it's just a trick. It's a hoax. The hyper-real is a hoax, a mind-created hoax. I think Baudrillard puts it somewhat more elegantly than that, but never mind. We don't even need to go into it too much to explain why turning our back on unconditioned reality as it is in itself, is going to cause problems for us. in a way we can relate it to, and there's no need for us to get religious about it, but we can relate it to what theologians have said about suffering or the state of hell. Some theologians, I don't know enough about it to say who, would say, well, there isn't such a thing as hell really, but when we're out of reach of God's grace, when we've cut ourselves out of God's grace, then that is hell. Because without the grace of God, there's nothing but pain and sterility. And I don't know what they say, what else you could say. But the absence of God's grace is itself hell. So it's an absence of. So that means there isn't really a thing as such a thing as hell. So that's quite a subtle approach. We don't have to say that because there's so much, but anything religious automatically kind of enmeshes us in all the stuff that we've been told over the centuries, which isn't really religion at all, but it's kind of the people's dogmatic thinking about religion, so it kind of goes down a dead end. It's actually the rationalizing. So the whole of our rational approach to religion is just another null set, really, same as our thinking about anything. But what we can say is there's no such thing as no such place as hell in terms of neurotic suffering. It's just that we have cut ourselves off from actual reality. And actual reality is the source of all good. It's where everything comes from. Where else would it come from? So it all comes out of reality. Reality is that thing with all the fruit in it, the big horn with the fruit in it, the cornucopia. That's reality. Everything comes out of it. Absolutely everything. It just shoots out. It's very abundant, as they like to say. So we've cut ourselves off from that. And because everything comes out of reality, that means we don't got nothing. So spiritually, whatever other way you might want to put it, we're totally impoverished. And that's where neurotic pain comes from. It comes from this extraordinary degree of existential poverty where we cut ourselves off from reality unwittingly. We never meant to do it.